Next Tuesday, representatives from Korea, China, and Japan will sit down for 3 days of talks to lay the groundwork for a trilateral free trade agreement.
For a preview of what to expect, we now connect live to Arirang's Hwang Ji-hye at the News Center. Now, Ji-hye, this first round comes more than 10 years after the three countries started doing joint research on a private level. What can we expect next week?
Kanya, as you said, as it's the first round of formal talks, the reps from each country will mainly be talking about the scope of the negotiations and the procedures for the talks. If and when the pact goes into effect, it will create the world's third largest economic bloc after the North American Free Trade Agreement and the European Union. Even President Park Geun-hye emphasized the importance of the three-way free trade agreement during her first cabinet meeting. Combined, Korea, China, and Japan have a gross domestic product that stands at around 14 trillion US dollars, accounting for 1/5 of the world output. With China being Korea's biggest trading partner and Japan its second, the Korean government expects the economic benefits of the trade deal to amount over $16 billion over the next 10 years. Experts add that China's growing domestic economy would provide a rich trading ground for Korean companies after the free trade agreement goes into effect.
Now, what are some of the Korean industries that would stand to benefit from the deal, and which would stand to lose, Jia?
The electronics, automobile, steel, machinery, and petrochemical industries in Korea would benefit from the trilateral trade pact. But Korea's light industries, such as those that specialize in fiber industry goods, would likely to get the short end of the stick. Their level of competitiveness would diminish as China has an edge in producing labor-intensive products. Japan's strength in the technology sector is also a threat to Korea. So all three countries are strong in the manufacturing industry, which hasn't been the case with other free trade agreements that Korea has implemented. Experts say that it is critical for the Korean government to keep this in mind during negotiations. Let's have a listen.
In previous or existing free trade deals, Korea has a competitive edge in manufacturing, its counterparts an edge in agriculture. But since all three countries, Korea, China, and Japan, are strong in manufacturing, the government should be sensitive to this issue during negotiations.
Korea, China, and Japan have a division of labor because the comparative advantage of each country's manufacturing industry is different. China has a comparative advantage in labor-intensive goods, and Japan has it in technology-intensive goods. The Korean government has to take a careful approach in deciding which areas Korea has an advantage.
Agricultural concerns always top the agenda during free trade negotiations involving Korea, but not this time around because both Japan and Korea are unwilling to open their agriculture industry.
Okay, so we have been talking about the economic effects of this trade deal, but this deal comes down to a lot more than just the money, am I correct?
You're right, Kanyong. First of all, analysts say that the negotiations will set the stage for the three countries' trading policies as the talks are being conducted under new governments. Another thing to keep an eye on is how Beijing and Tokyo interact. Some see these talks as a way for Beijing to engage with Japan amid a territorial dispute in the East China Sea. China is also believed to be trying to counter the Trans-Pacific Partnership, an initiative led by the U.S. which is trying to reaffirm its role in the Asia-Pacific region. China, on the other hand, is focusing its efforts on the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, which involves 10 ASEAN nations and 6 major Asia-Pacific economies, including Korea, China, and Japan. So for Korea, which is trying to become an Asia-Pacific hub of free trade agreements, experts say it's important to approach each free trade deal strategically.
Korea has to seek harmony with its various free trade agreements while aiming to achieve its ultimate goal of creating a free trade zone in the Asia-Pacific region. Korea could also act as a mediator between China and the U.S., as well as between Japan and China.
So, Jia, how long will the talks last?
Normally, negotiations for free trade agreements between two countries take between 1 to 3 years, but since this one involves 3 countries, analysts expect the negotiations will take longer, especially when taking into account that relations between all 3 countries are rather chilly right now.
Right, and the more parties there are, the more kind of benefits that they'll want, so we expect that to last longer. All right, Arirang's Hwang Ji-hye reporting live on the trilateral free trade talks between Korea, China, and Japan that are set to kick off next week.